Hello and welcome back to Parley. This one was paid for by Densoro. Hope you'll enjoy listening. This one is about consequences of miniaturization. Hola, Capitan. Densoro says, been a while, so I thought I'd grab myself another birthday parlay. Heard there's been some big changes lately. Hope they're treating you well. Moving is exhausting. It has been exhausting. Densoro continues, I feel like the miniaturization of magic technology has had a weird impact on storytelling, especially in combat-heavy anime, video games, and superhero movies. Perhaps because we've turned cell phones into digital omni-tools, there's a tendency to pack endless gadgets into a catsuit, turn weapons into transforming multi-tools, or allow fighters to de- or rematerialize their weaponry, bag of holding style. It seems like some fundamental rules of engagement have been forgotten when characters can summon their entire arsenal as a free action. Let's examine it in terms of the appeal of physicality, the opportunity costs of encumbrance, and splitting of form from function. Together, these have unforeseen knock-on effects on the narrative. Feel free to pause and discuss anywhere and especially between sections. Oh, but you've structured this very cleanly into 3 different topics, so we'll definitely go in that order and just talk as we go. Before we get started, let's just investigate this premise a little bit more. So what you're saying is that you feel like perhaps because of the existence of very, very miniaturized technology, this can, give me all the information in the universe at the touch of a button, and it's got infinite entertainment, and it can play meaningful video games increasingly, and et cetera, right? Because of that stuff, perhaps you feel like there's been a trend toward that taking place in media as well, not necessarily because they're using cell phones. Like there's this trend toward imagining potentially not technological, like just pure magic, that reduces the physicality, I guess, of engagement, right? That there's less physical touchstones for the thing being done. Perhaps because we are experiencing that in real life, and so the things people are imagining are a little bit like that. On its own, that makes sense. You would expect that to happen, but you're suggesting that there are a lot of consequences that has some potentially negative effects on narrative because there's a lot of benefits to having physical touchstones for what you are doing. Interesting. That seems plausible. That seems possible. I do feel like already, though, I would put pressure on the word forgotten. I'll read again. You said, it seems like some fundamental rules of engagement have been forgotten when characters can summon their entire arsenal as a free action. Personally, at the moment anyway, I am more compelled by the idea that just simply by accident, the works that do feature this miniaturization of technology influence, haven't, in the sense of forgotten, they haven't maybe remembered that those can be useful things. But I'm not sure I would agree with the idea that that has been forgotten broadly. You see what I mean? It's not as if there aren't any works that remember that concept. I feel like there are just more works, and a lot of the new ones maybe don't use that concept. I'm not sure I would be willing to agree, at least not yet, we'll see by the end of the parlay, that in a global sense, we as humanity have in any meaningful way really forgotten the benefit of that, as much as there's a lot of new media that doesn't employ the benefits of that approach. Not that there isn't any anymore because people abandoned it or something. Maybe I'll think that by the end of this parlay, but at the moment I wouldn't agree with that. That may not be the claim you're making, but in that way of phrasing it, I detect some concern that people are leaving behind completely that type of stuff, and I don't agree that they are. Let's get into it more. First, remember, this is the appeal of physicality. There's the raw sensory appeal of hard tech, watching bike tires turn and glint in the afternoon sun, listening to the purr of an engine on a quiet stretch of highway. It makes me think of the Japanese term ma, embodied by Hayao Miyazaki as the silence between claps. Moments of quiet reflection, grounding yourself by counting your senses. It reminds you that this fantastical technology exists when the lights go out. Mundane concerns like storage help us put ourselves in the character's shoes. just quickly, I like this because an important detail here would be, if you're going to argue that that's been left behind, we definitely need to very clearly identify why it would be good. Why is it good to have the inconvenience, people might say, of, all the nuts and bolts that, traditional weaponry, for example, might involve. Like, why is that good? What are supposedly the benefits of taking the slow way? And it will also be important to discuss what some of the benefits of the miniaturization are, right? It's not just better to do it the analog way, if you don't mind the term analog for this concept. I think I'll use that for the rest of this parlay. Analog versus, let's say, digital miniaturized approaches. We need to be clear about what the benefits of those are as much as is possible in the time we have. And I like that you clarified that a little bit. There are moments of reflection present. There's some quiet. It just takes some time, basically, right? There's something less instant. It's about the journey rather than the destination a little bit. And importantly, I think I want to devil's advocate include that being about the destination isn't all bad. There's just definitely some problems if you were literally always all about the destination only and there was no journey. Like, that's obviously bad. But provided that there are examples of both, I don't think that's necessarily an issue. But yes, I definitely agree that there are merits to the journey. There's a tendency, Densoro continues in art, to push a pose or character design instead of staying in a safe, boring middle ground. Varied and bombastic silhouettes break up the monotony and provide intuitive visual information on a character. I think in a lot of ways, miniaturization runs counter to this, in allowing any generic main character to pull a Capsule Corp motorcycle out of their pocket instead of embodying a biker, a street racer, or an outlaw. I think that losing touch with function creates less satisfying mechanical imagery. Compare Patlabor to Michael Bay's Transformers, where the former shows pistons firing like the enormous mechanical tendons of a robot hand. Michael Bay's character designs are piles of non-specific metallic noise. Sometimes it's hard to tell which part is supposed to be the head. They have a million more moving parts, but none of them serve an intelligible purpose, other than to confuse the viewer's eye. Yes, this is an interesting one. So, in the middle, when you brought up the point about artists kind of pushing a pose or a character design, I had a moment of confusion where I thought, yeah, hold on, I feel like there's been a trend toward overcrowded character designs. What's going on there? But this is an interesting way to resolve that you've presented. So the idea is, yeah, there might be more detail, but if there isn't more function, it couldn't, and they aren't making the effort anyway, to have that be connected to some kind of action. There is maybe an arms race of visual design. I'm definitely compelled by that point. Something I've been thinking about recently, this is a weird, different way it's happened for me, is how, so I've been playing a variety over the years of games that are quite character-driven. They're marketing their characters very heavily. This might be a series or a game. So-called gacha games often focus on a wide variety of meant-to-be very appealing visually characters, and they have to make those characters feel fresh or distinct to succeed, or to do as best as they can anyway. And I've thought a little bit about a few character designs that have left an impression on me and are very popular broadly, clearly it's not just me, over the years. I think about, for example, in the Fate franchise, Fate Stay Night, as Tosaka Rin. I'm thinking more of her like street or house clothes. She's got that red shirt and then a skirt, the thigh highs, that outfit. And then Saber's outfit, the plate mail, chest plate, knightly outfit, but with a sort of full dress, very long, pretty conservative dress. That outfit, right? Those are, I think I can argue, cemented as very iconic character designs, and they're pretty simple. I think Rin's outfit in particular, like, these are very normal clothes. Like, that's a real key of that outfit. But it still gives her a little bit of aristocratic flair. It's not full of a bunch of detail, but what is there is pretty subtle. We could go into that character design in great detail. I happily would, if if people were interested in that, but it doesn't bear mentioning here. Just to say that I've thought about a lot how those designs are very, very simple, and the details are used not exactly the way that Densoro is describing. They're not for mechanical reasons necessarily, but they only included the minimum amount of details to get the point across, is kind of how I would argue. I've also been enjoying Arknights, but Arknights character designs are quite busy. Now, a lot of them do feature a lot of mechanical components. Like, you obviously can make a very, very noisy character design where all the components of the character design still feel like they do say or even have a function for the character. You can do that. I'm definitely willing to agree that usually that isn't what's done. But one of the things I like about Arknights is that the character designs often do fulfill that role. I think of like a design I really like, if you want to look up one, is Bagpipe from Arknights. Bagpipe is a soldier that wields this gigantic, I'm not entirely clear what this thing is supposed to be for. She uses it as a melee weapon. I'm pretty sure it's a siege ram. It's called a pile driver spear. And in Arknights, characters use arts, the magic in that universe, using physical foci that are often machines. Like, there's a sort of magic technology thing going on. They're often rather large, oversized, kind of adapted versions of existing weapons. There's another character that sticks out of my mind, Absinthe, who uses kind of a wand, but it's like a revolver with a wand thing on the end. It's kind of just a revolver, but it's portrayed more as a wand, and she's doing magic damage with it. But that aesthetic is really cool to me, with the little laser sight coming off. Anyway, Bagpipe, you can see, the tactical vest where she would carry the ammo, the shells for the piledriver spear. You can see the mechanism where the shell casing is going to fly out when the slide kicks back after the piledriver spear fires. How does this thing work exactly? I don't know. There's going to be mad recoil. So there's a little stock that you could brace yourself against. I feel like that would dislocate your shoulder. They say she's very strong in a lot of the story. I don't know. You could argue there's some parts of the design that don't embody that. Looking at Bagpipe physically, I mean, she might be said to be very strong in the story, but does it look like this, like, normal girl is going to be able to withstand the recoil of a gun battering ram? No, not really, no. It feels like no matter how strong she is, she will physically be thrown backwards from it firing. But give them a little bit of slack, right? And that's definitely an approach you could take here, but I don't think it's fair to accuse Densoro of being inflexible that way. Don't you think? Densoro, I feel like it's worth giving you the benefit of the doubt. There's such a thing as hand-waving small mechanical details in the name of fun. What you're trying to say is that you feel like removing the approach that a piece of a design like has a function, whether it's a mechanical function or some immersive role, it gives you a detail about the character, is bad in some ways. Like, there are some things lost when you do that. Yeah, I would agree. And I'm further compelled that there's a kind of arms race. Like, why are the character designs in Arknights all really busy? Why? Why is that game happening now? Why does it just so happen that there aren't a lot of games like that happening, further back? Why were the character designs that stick out to people more simple in the past, but now a little more complex? One reason might be that there's a kind of arms race of visual noise. Because we've already done the simple character designs, it feels like if you were to just make another really pared down design, well, it's going to seem too normal or whatever. And so you sort of have to always top the next design, which, unless you put a lot of effort into making all those components actually mean something in the world, it's just going to be visual noise. Sure, I think it's key to note here that it doesn't have to be. There are cases where we get even more complex, even more detailed. All the components or most of the components of the design serve a purpose. Designs. Like, it isn't just that they're all visual noise. There are some that are even more good, I think. But focusing on fewer details more definitely has merit as well, I would agree. And the temptation to make all the detail that's kind of required from a marketing perspective, maybe you'd say, not mean anything is definitely there and has negative consequences. Would totally agree, absolutely. I guess, again, I would put the caveat that when you say, They have a million more moving parts, but none of them serve an intelligible purpose other than to confuse the viewer's eye. I would argue that that's a bit of a straw man presentation of what the merits of having all that detail is. Like, it's fine that you do not enjoy it, but I don't think it's fair to say that is the only thing that it does. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's lots of things that can be fascinating about that spectacle. It's just not the only benefit. It would be a shame if the benefit of a more analog design was wiped away by the overpopularity of these more digital, lacking detail designs, right? It would be sad if the one was squelching the other. But provided there's both, I think that can be valuable. I think both of them can be very fun. They definitely have different strengths. Personally, I think there's an awe to visual noise sometimes, not really in Michael-based Transformers, but having a lot of detail when it is used for a purpose, but doesn't mean anything specific, can be enjoyable. There's some forms of abstract art, or like another example would be the visual design of Disco Elysium comes to mind a little bit, as a game that has a lot of brush-strokey detail that sort of drowns a little bit of definition in some of the like the different traits you can pick in Disco Elysium for your build. But I think it has a positive effect because those things are vague. They are constructs, and so having it be that they're a little more nebulous is good. I may come back to this point later, but another thing that came to mind is the idea of like soft magic. It isn't necessarily worse to have magic systems that are not defined. It would be unfair to say that there's like no merit or it's just shallow to have those systems. But it seems noteworthy to me that were you trying to get someone into fantasy for the first time, it seems easier to get them into a soft magic system than a hard one, and it needn't be particularly good either, which is basically the same as just omitting detail. Do people like Lord of the Rings because it happens to be a softer approach to magic? I don't think that Tolkien was uninterested in the mechanics of magic. He just chose that aesthetic with various benefits and detriments. But does that mean that that's why people who like Lord of the Rings appreciate it? No, for a lot of people, it's probably because that is also more accessible because it doesn't focus on all that detail, which might be overwhelming to someone who isn't sold on the fun of getting into that detail yet. And of course, even as someone who is sold on the fun of getting into all that detail, I don't always want to or have time to, which leads us directly to the second point about the opportunity costs. Ooh, I'm salivating already, of encumbrance. Densoro says encumbrance gets a bad rap thanks to obnoxious carry limits, but I believe it can present interesting opportunity costs. At its most basic, it might be difficult to pick things up or open doors while your hands are full of military hardware. There's so many small considerations while navigating the environment, like whether your kit can fit through the doorway. There's such believable human fallibility in these mundane actions. Optics are another key factor. Carrying certain tools signals intent. A platoon of uniformed professionals gives a very different impression if they're carrying stretchers versus riot shields. This is why the trope of briefcase weaponry came about, to hide intent. In Warframe, however, I feel this is underutilized. There's no narrative tension, no plausible deniability, no will they won't they. If the Corpus sees a player on the premises, they will shoot. The briefcase offers no alibi. This is one way in which an aesthetic is decontextualized from its practical applications. Indeed, I think the Warframe example is good in the sense that Warframe features some collaboration with the Corpus faction, but in missions, there's never a question about whether you're going to attack. And the premise of Warframe kind of makes this impossible too, right? You're piloting a legendary war machine that everybody knows has won entire wars in the past, and the techno-aristocracy that generated Warframes wanted them to be bombastic and unsubtle for the sake of demonstrating status. And so, more or less, I was kind of hand-waving the lore a little bit, but you get it. And so they're not really supposed to be able to have that, but of course the other reason is it would take a lot more development time, and that's not a focus of the game. Perfectly fine, right? But as you say, it does make what the weapon is less interesting in that way. That metric of a weapon being interesting is kind of lost that way. Now, I did already say, premising this section, that I think it's key to remember, again, that while it sounds good to take your time and create immersion with an aesthetic, I think we need to stick to what are the benefits? Because there are benefits to not including encumbrance mechanics in your tabletop role-playing game. For example, it doesn't take as long. Like, if you don't have that much time to play, then you can get to some combat and role-playing, like, with the more limited time you have. Now, if you have a very good game master and the privilege to spend the time doing this, you can, it's great in my opinion, enjoy encumbrance as a way to improve combat and story and the other elements of the game, or enjoy it as its own experience. There's something fun about managing an inventory when that is well balanced, like when the choices are actually interesting. It's done poorly often enough that perhaps some people have simply never have the good fortune of experiencing this, sure. But again, I am cautious of the idea that, like, it's not only because of obnoxious carry limits, you know what I mean? Like, encumbrance isn't strictly better, but people just don't do it well. It is still a trade-off, even if done well. It's just something that, like, can be done well. I don't know. It's not the best thing ever, always, in every way. Not that you're saying that. I feel a little concerned that, Densoro, I'm acting like you're providing these extremely linear, I said straw man argument before, perceptions of these things, when you're just trying to make a point for the sake of discussion. So please don't, this is not accusatory. I'm just saying that I think it's important to keep in mind that there are some detriments to using like encumbrance or including a lot of visual detail as well. There can be good experiences that just aren't about that appeal. It doesn't strictly upgrade a piece of work to include those things. It's just a way that pieces of work can be good. I would definitely be willing to agree that a lot of pieces of work nowadays, perhaps following the trend that the miniaturization of technology encourages them to, aren't including those elements, but they really do fit the goal of that piece of work. They just sort of were forgotten, you used that term before, when that piece of work was being developed. Like, it would benefit lots of pieces of work it's not in. I'm just insisting that it wouldn't benefit all pieces of work. There are benefits other than that one, which, when I say it that way, it sounds kind of ridiculous that you don't think that. Anyway, let's move on. I don't know. The thing about encumbrance for me, I really like the optics thing, like the rules of engagement thing. People see someone in a medium magic setting, say my campaign setting for tabletop role-playing games, and you're carrying like 6 weapons, you know, like several person armory worth of weapons, more weapons than you could use yourself, and just a backup weapon, right? You have 2 swords, a 2-handed axe, a 2-handed spear, 3 knives. Somebody looks at you in a medium magic setting and says, do you have an invisible party member? You know what I mean? Like, they would have the sense to say, not only are you hostile and dangerous, you're probably not alone, even if it looks like you are. Like, why are you carrying all of those reasonably expensive and heavy weapons? There is something wrong, right? And so my player, who has a build where they actually are personally going to use all those weapons, or they want to swap weapons a lot, there's an interesting consequence to that grounds them in the weapons they've chosen to bring with them. Maybe balances it a little bit. That could be cool. That's a benefit. Also reminds them they have it. It keeps them sort of in the world or the theater of mind, right? But yeah, there's something that feels like it fits the role of being a specific adventurer, where, like, if you want that to be your build, experiencing the consequences, socially perhaps, of having that be your build feels relevant to the goal of playing the game. It might not be. It might be that your group's goal and interest is in getting way into the math, and that feels like a kind of annoying side effect where you don't want to feel like, if it is interesting from a mathematics perspective to game the system by bringing a bunch of weapons, you don't want to be weighed down by, like, literally being weighed down by the weapons, by needing to carry them around. That seems like a pretty involved merit to not using encumbrance, not one that is in the name of streamlining. It's in the name of going in depth, just not with encumbrance. You see what I mean? Well, that doesn't interest me at all, personally. And I actually really like encumbrance as a mechanic when balanced reasonably. But again, I feel like it's useful to weave in that I do think it's a bad fit a good amount of the time. A good amount of the people not using encumbrance probably wouldn't like it even if they did use it really well. I just would agree that there's also probably lots of people who would really enjoy it if they used it really well. And also that the official rules for encumbrance in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition are kind of bad, like not good. Sure, absolutely. I feel like the briefcase weapon thing also bears slight focus just before we move on. And obviously I've read the rest of the parlay, so we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Is a briefcase weapon unfun if the piece of work it's in demonstrates no mechanic of hiding intent? Well, it could provide a setting detail that in this setting you might, on some occasions, hide intent, but you just won't be during the gameplay or runtime of this piece of media. Do you see what I mean? A simple example of something that comes a little close to this is how in the John Wick films, we mostly follow John Wick while he's fighting for many, many, many minutes on hand, after the facade of civilized society and subtlety has dropped. Therefore, it isn't a huge focus of the John Wick films that they are using, relatively subtle a lot of the time, methods of combat, that it is rather down to earth. We see when that's fallen apart, but the movies have the aesthetic of a world where that is relevant, just not during the events of the movies. You see what I mean? And because we get a lot of other details in the setting, like the mechanics of the hotel neutral ground that they all make use of, and there's all this weird game of chicken with respecting that. Because we have details like that, I feel like it still works, that there is this aesthetic that you suspend your disbelief that people are subtle in this world. We're just not going to see that much. That just isn't the focus of these films. That's fine, I think. That's maybe an outlier example. Like I was able to come up with that example quickly, but I definitely don't think that means there's like lots of examples of that being done. But just to say, I don't think it necessarily has to be used for that to be negative. Like in Warframe, the briefcase rocket launcher that you can get as a weapon is a corpus weapon. You can imagine it being brought to meetings where it really is hiding intent to some extent, or upholding an aesthetic of imposing business acumen, but then morphs into a rocket launcher. Like, that seems fine. It's just that when you get it as a Warframe, there's really no way to hide that you're an unstoppable killing machine. Now, I do think it would be interesting if you added a mechanic to Warframe where, like, one could simply cover oneself up with a cloak. You know what I mean? Like, your Warframe, your Tenno could go, for diplomacy's sake, I could wear a simple piece of cloth over me as a way to hide my intentions a little bit, right? Yeah, that's a thought, right? So I don't know. I'm a little bit on both sides with that. To some extent, I feel like it actually kind of works in a way, and just doesn't really make sense for the gameplay we get. On the other hand, yeah, without much effort, you could hide your intent a lot better, and that feels like it would be relevant to the plot in Warframe now and again. Like when we have quests where we collaborate with Corpus, why do they not run away screaming the moment they see us? That's what I would do if I was in their position. Anyway, so yeah, there's maybe an issue there. Densoro concludes with the third section. The adage, form follows function, seems to fall by the wayside sometimes. For example, Gara Prime has foot-long glass blades extending off her elbows, but never drives them into her enemies' ribs in cramped elevators. It's an unfired Chekhov's gun. Series like Mobile Suit Gundam or Bio Booster Armor Guyver, was that correct, tend to acknowledge these natural weapons more directly. The elbow is Guyver number 1's main weapon. Anyone who wants to stop him might have to crush it or remove the entire forearm. Many Gundams can fly with a massive array of jet engines strapped to their backs and try to disable each other by shooting each other's engines out. I feel like this puts up a net for the artists and the characters. If they want a character that can fly, how do they make that character look like they can fly? How will other characters stop them from flying? The stakes are intuitive and don't require as much exposition when the action is so clear. I feel like by now, we've spent enough time talking about clearly there are some other benefits to not doing this, so I won't go on about that more. Definitely I feel like this section serves to, like, you want to point out the interesting merits of including those details in character designs, which, yeah, they're interesting. So to be clear, we could again dig a little bit into, like, of course, the aesthetic is of the glass blades on Gaara's arms is still cool, even if they're not used. Like, that can still be enjoyable. It gives the aesthetic of it reminds you it's glass a little bit more. When you use abilities that shatter the glass, you see a lot of the glass detail disappear. I don't think it's necessarily pointless, an unfired Chekhov's gun completely, just because it isn't used to viscerally stab, just because it isn't used in an analog way. I don't think that makes it useless or visual noise automatically, but I get your point that there is a different way of using those details that is really interesting. So I won't go on about that point anymore. Yeah, I think that the put up a net thing is interesting, right? If a lot of the cluttering and the oversimplifying in character designs is, if not on purpose, being done due to a trend toward making things more immediately appreciable to the audience, you make an interesting, compelling point that when you include these key details that actually matter, you're doing something that also makes things easier to appreciate quickly. That is a clever way to make the stakes intuitive. You don't need to present a bunch of exposition for the vulnerability of a Gundam if they have visible boosters that you could obviously shoot and break and then it would not be able to fly, right? And that saves some exposition. If the thing that would be making a work inaccessible, like in my Lord of the Rings soft magic example, would be explaining how all this stuff works, well, making these character designs where things do what they appear to do, and you kind of know that at a glance, also saves that detailing, that exposition time, right? So it's a little weird that it maybe isn't used as much as it could be. I can buy the use of the word forgotten at the beginning of this parlay more than I could. It doesn't. It feels like a case of they could have done it this way and it would be better in some ways, but didn't because they simply didn't think of that. Not because it's like purposefully being avoided or there's some reason people wouldn't appreciate it or something, but there truly is a merit that is kind of wasted. I kind of insisted earlier in this parlay, this point that it's important to acknowledge the merits of like streamlining things this way. It can be used to focus on something else, or there's all these other benefits. The visual spectacle can be cool, that can be enjoyable. You can also enjoy both. Like, it might just be like you want something that you can enjoy at a glance, like you want some sick fight choreography. It doesn't have to be the underlying meaning of the combat, though I generally prefer that, for me anyway. And I kind of wanted to clarify that point, that I felt like, it doesn't mean that it's just strictly better to do things this way, but I am also a very firm believer in the school of having your cake and eating it too. Like, I think that people too often try to treat things like it has to be one way or the other. And I don't want to give you that idea in this parlay. I'm definitely sold from some of these examples, particularly this one about details in character designs condensing exposition. That's a good point. I'm very sold that there are some works that, as you say, have kind of lost the good industry trick of condensing exposition with character designs that are meaningful. Now, I'm not sure I feel like there is any real cause to that, though, to bridge into our last section and close the parlay. I'm not sure I feel like there is a that much of a cause, like that it is the miniaturization of technology. Yeah, like generally, I guess so. But I'm kind of more compelled by the idea that it's just the trends that are natural, things going in and out of fashion. And once people get used to things being all streamlined, having something analog will appeal to them. After all, it has merits. It objectively just has merits. So as long as people see those merits and get enough time to become tired of the thing that's become common, they'll just start enjoying it again. It's not because this is the new permanent version of people's tastes due to the progression of technology. In my opinion, it's actually just a phase, as many things are a phase. And I think that Densoro and I maybe still appreciate these things simply because we have the time, the privilege, I think, to delve into our interests enough that we just kind of can't forget that thing is enjoyable, right? I, speak for myself, have room for all of these appeals together. And so, yeah, I haven't forgotten that having character designs that have details that actually mean something is valuable. But nor do I never enjoy things that don't employ that approach and instead focus on something else. So I don't know. I mean, I think that for the most part, I feel like it's the natural way that trends evolve and shift over time. And I would expect this to change back or change back and forth. I kind of feel like it already is a little bit, maybe. I think of things like Armored Core, for example, that new Armored Core game. I don't know a lot about Armored Core, but I'm learning more now because it looks really cool. So that's an example. There might be a lot of visual spectacle in that game, but similarly, there's a focus on the individual parts of the mechs being, that's going to attack you, or you can attack that part and destroy it, or something like that, right? And I mentioned this is a random example, but Arknights has a lot of character designs that have a lot of details, but often explain quite a lot of that detail, or a lot of those things build character, even though I would describe them as, a lot of them, fairly noisy designs. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like it will swing back. And I think another key detail is that a lot of new pieces of media are just additional pieces of media. It's not as if of all the media, 80% of it used to use the analog approach, but now 80% of it uses the digital approach. I feel like the percentage of digital approach is higher, but the amount of media is also much higher. And it's simply that the increased number of media pieces produced this year largely featured the digital approach. There might be a surprisingly similar amount of analog pieces of media, but the percentage of analog pieces of media is diluted. That feels like an unnecessarily negative word, but fine, by a lot of new digital media. Another example would be, I've thought about this a lot with video games. I feel like the type of game that I enjoy actually hasn't gotten that much more popular, and the explosive popularity of video games is more like things that are technically video games, but which I am not really interested in at all. Like very accessible video games have drawn a lot of interest. And I think that's a good thing. The people enjoying those things aren't replacing that thing that was deep that they're enjoying. It's not like there was a deep thing they were enjoying and now they're replacing that with a shallow thing they're enjoying. I don't think there's a replacing happening. They had nothing in that slot, and now they're trying this new thing, which has I'm not going to use the term shallow, but accessible option available. And so more people will trickle down to the thing that maybe I think is more interesting, deeper, sure, because there's a path to do so. I said briefly earlier in this parlay this point about how I want people to be investing their interest in things because the reason to do so is clearly stated. I think that for a lot of these details, it's just not clear to people why getting into all the nitty-gritty details of how the robot works, just as a random example, it's not clear enough to people why that is fun, like what the enjoyment of that is. It doesn't have to be fun, but why it's beneficial, right? And I don't think that it's fair if one were to accuse people of not having the attention or interest or respect for humanity to engage in those things, just because the reason to do so isn't clear. You see what I mean? To put it a different way, I think a lot of people don't enjoy encumbrance, not at all because the carry limits are boring or whatever, but because the way it was presented was badly balanced. So I guess that is the annoying carry limit to some extent, but the game master didn't do it good or whatever. And because the benefit of encumbrance simply wasn't clear. Like, why should they be interested in encumbrance? Just because. You see what I mean? I think it's only good for media like this for people to be pushed to enjoy it for a reason. That is why people would enjoy these interesting character design ideas you're describing. People enjoying the shallow, overcrowded Transformers design is because, if you want to be cynical and say it this way, they don't demand a reason to enjoy something. They're just willing to look at the thing that was marketed. If people always required a reason for enjoying the things they enjoyed, that would mean that they would enjoy these more involved things because they have merits. A way I like to put it is, I don't have to convince you. If you see all the data, you see all the options, and you're given enough time where you're not punished for making either choice, and I'm so right that the thing I like is good, you just will agree, given enough time. There's no need to convince you that it is that way. And that's the approach I'm trying to take in this parlay. I personally think Densoro is largely correct that this is a beneficial way to present designs, but I don't think it will do any good to tell people that it's like bad to enjoy the ones they are enjoying. They'll simply need to be exposed to enough different options that they see the real objective merits of the one I'm interested in, and then they will consume it because it is good. You know, to put it a different way, I don't think people need to be reminded of the merits as much as long as they just get every option and are free to explore, they will find those things. And if they're not free to explore, I think it's unfair to say it's because they're ignorant of these benefits, because they take time to appreciate. And people may simply not have the time to appreciate these definitely interesting ways of presenting media. I want to read Densoro's conclusion with that in mind. Ultimately, Densoro says, I feel that the compartmentalization of these tools leads to compartmentalization of conflict itself and characters' lives. The phrase quality of life has a different meaning in the medical profession. It literally evaluates whether the patient's life is still rewarding. Are they still having fun? I don't think characters get the time to ask themselves this question anymore. The same way that their battle armor can be summoned and dismissed with the flick of a wrist, so can their humanity. They're optimized for grand gestures like blowing up Galactus, but we don't see how they handle grocery shopping with their remaining family a month later on a Thursday. By scrubbing sensory hooks and human vulnerability out of our media, we're robbed of chances to empathize with the characters. By decoupling aesthetics from logic, we've created weightless, monotonous conflicts where characters can pull a new weapon out of their back pockets every 5 minutes, and a media landscape where characters' daily lives are decried as filler instead of a touchstone for the regular human viewers. This person's only skill is war. Can they remember the simple joys of civilian life? Used to be a juicy narrative thread. But in my estimation, it's fallen into disuse because the first sentence describes most heroes now. Their only skill is war. And my perspective is a more moderate version of this claim. I do not feel like I would agree that sensory hooks and human vulnerability have been scrubbed out of any media. It's more like there's a lot of new media that simply lacks those things. I'm not sure I'm that compelled by the idea that there's a lot of media that had them but now doesn't, rather that there's simply way more media, and most of the additional media never did, and doesn't currently have those things. And I just don't know if I feel like that's really that bad. It would be bad if all media was like that, but it isn't, is sort of my position. I don't think it's bad to have a piece of media that sort of bridges over. And Densoro, I think my biggest disagreement is that you seem to be claiming that, again, like I described before the conclusion part, that there's this phenomenon maybe occurring where people were enjoying some deep piece of media and they were engaging with other people's human experiences. They were having an empathy, but they replaced their empathy engaging piece of media with one that doesn't engage their empathy. And I just don't think they did. I don't think a lot of people did do that. I think, one, it's the case that a lot of the time people are adding media to their life, so it's not replacing a piece of deeper media. And it may be that because there's a new wave of very shallow media that's easy to appreciate but doesn't engage your empathy, it may be that currently people aren't seeking out much deeper media. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to arrive at a sort of ground state when things level out and our society leaves the awkward teenage years of the internet, where there's infinite instant gratification content. It doesn't mean that at that point, after that's over, people aren't going to also enjoy some deeper engaging media. It might just be that this is the new thing, and so people are a bit more interested in it now. Maybe a bit of an optimistic perspective, fine. Odd coming from me, but my job here is the devil's advocate for this perspective. And you've stated it in a strong enough way that we can do that, which is fantastic. So it's not bad to be disagreeing. I hope that everybody knows that, I guess, but I just wanted to say. In fact, this is only productive because you said things in a rather strongly stated way that perhaps you're simply trying to make the point or you really feel that way. Either way, it's helpful for discussion. So it's not bad, but I don't really agree. The other reason I don't really agree is that I kind of feel like people consuming the filler, the touchstone for regular human lives, or handling grocery shopping with their remaining family a month later on a Tuesday, I kind of feel like people consuming that media before, like, just because it is the media where you could have an empathy experience doesn't mean people were having that experience with it. I think it's more like they had no choice before. Now they do have a choice. And so they're trying the thing that they may have enjoyed or preferred all along. It just wasn't offered as much. And maybe only with the perspective of the benefits and detriments of that trade-off will they appreciate the deeper piece of media. I can certainly say that that's happened to me. I feel like I watched a number of series that I would describe as being good ways to engage with empathetically now, but when I watched them when I was younger, I didn't have the perspective to appreciate that. Now that I've seen a lot of media that lacks those features, it's more noticeable to me that they have them, and given enough time, I have come to the point where I appreciate that. Maybe I have too much faith in people doing the same because I had that experience. A fair point. But we can't prove either way that people will or won't, of course. So I'm more optimistic, I guess. You could also say I'm more pessimistic about how people appreciated media in the past. Another point that I feel like is kind of a separate parlay, so I'm not going to get into it too much here. But another, in my opinion, pretty strong point against this idea is the fact that lots more media means lots more pressure for media. And I would argue that the deeper pieces of media that provide that empathy opportunity nowadays are better when they exist, because it's more punishing to spend a lot of time on something that will, unless it's very good, be decried as filler by a lot of the audience. It's bad if the audience won't take the time of day for those things, but it has the positive consequence that if something is to succeed with that as an element, it better be darn good. And I think that some of them have been. My own experience, again, only limited to me, is that the slower pieces of media I've consumed in my adult life have been fewer but better. And I don't think it's just because I've found them. For example, I personally think March Comes In Like a Lion, that's an anime about this kid playing shogi, and it focuses very heavily on the atmosphere of his personal life and of the shogi hall and the games, not on the action. There's really no real form of action in the show. There's nothing bombastic, though it is quite a sight to see. I think it's a pretty show. And I think that show is an example of something that was really pushed to find the interest in those moments, not to assume that it's interesting in and of itself to see our protagonist going grocery shopping with their kind of found family on the Thursday. The show was forced not to assume people will enjoy that, but to make sure it found every ounce of interest in those moments. And I think that's good. To be blunt and put it another way, seeing how the Galactus killer handles grocery shopping with their remaining family on a Thursday needs to prove that it is interesting or worth being enjoyed. I don't think people just should inherently appreciate that. The same way that I don't think people should just inherently appreciate blowing up Galactus. Who cares about Galactus? Stuff like that. But that's only my perspective. I'm definitely of the perspective where I often get kind of initially puzzled when people care at all about basically anything, because I feel like nothing feels the need to prove that it is actually going to be good. People just say the new Overwatch game, and it's like, oh, Blizzard, catchwords, therefore I'm going to buy the game. And it's like, no. Like, until the developers say why it's going to be fun and then demonstrate that with gameplay footage, you shouldn't care about that game or any other game. And 95% of games that come out, they never do that. So who cares? Like, why would I give them the time of day? I guess my perspective is that applies to both of these types of media. And I kind of feel like having more competition makes people more prone to asking, like, but why this one? Or when it's pitched to a friend, that friend has to be able to say, well, here's why you should do this, even though your schedule's full and you otherwise wouldn't. Like, I have to have a reason, basically, to pitch it to you. Whereas before, I mean, the court only had these two authors, so you're gonna read what they wrote. you know, it may be plodding, slow-paced media, but that doesn't mean you're gonna get a deep experience out of it. It means that's all you have, and like it or not, want it right now in your life or not, that's simply all that's offered. So I don't know. I liked this parlay. It really changed my opinion about this a little bit. I really do feel like there are some, while it might be a subtle shift in opinion, there are some points where the use of character designs that don't focus on character detail, while it might seem reasonable in the show it's being done, that piece of media is focusing on something else. You've convinced me that in some cases it is kind of strictly better or an upgrade for those pieces of media to do things that way. However, I remain skeptical of the idea that people are removing empathic experiences from their life rather than that they're simply getting more experiences and the new ones aren't additional sources of empathy. I kind of feel like I made a mistake in this parlay by not premising it by saying, yeah, it's so self-evident that I don't feel the need to be convinced or explain it, that a lot of current media is kind of vapid and empty. Yeah, I completely, like, there's no arguing that, right? Absolutely, it totally is. And maybe I should have started with that. I guess I felt like our target audience here, Densoro, but people are probably, that's probably an easy sell for most of you. Is that correct? But I do personally walk away from this feeling, yeah, I have a more positive outlook on the situation. And I do personally think that you have given a lot of privilege to pieces of media that take their time, perhaps not enough privilege to the benefits of a piece of media that gets down to business. I don't think people being patient for no payoff is a virtue. And you're not saying that there is no payoff. You're saying, well, here's all these payoffs. But I feel like it's a little unfair to suggest that if you don't do that, that the only other thing is shallow. Now, in your parlay, you didn't focus on the merits of that, and that's fine. I don't want to put an opinion in your mouth here. I just feel like I wanted to give voice in this parlay to the potential benefits of not doing your media this way, not focusing on the mechanical details of a piece of media, even though there are clear merits to doing so, and even though some pieces of media may strictly benefit from including that, there are other benefits that are perfectly valid as well. And it maybe isn't so bad to create pieces of media that simply lack any advanced benefit or merit because they can provide a bridge where people can then enjoy the more involved piece of media. Just as a very final, simple example, I have watched a good amount of Critical Role, and I'm pretty lukewarm on it. I initially really enjoyed it, but the more I played myself, the more I felt like, well, I want to go beyond that way of playing a bit. Though I enjoy their acting well enough from time to time. I'm not saying that it's not good, though. It does a good job of weaving together a long-form narrative with a game that a lot of people are interested in and can relate to, and it uses that game as a kind of framework for what's going on in the story, for growth and progression over time. I think that's a very clear example of how if you think the gameplay in Critical Role is shallow, well, but is it strictly worse for your enjoyment of Dungeons & Dragons, for more people to be interested in Dungeons & Dragons? Now, some people might say yes. There's arguments that, yes, that has watered down the hobby with a lot of people who are interested in the same thing, but they're like not interested in the same thing. But I actually think that it's made it better because you know what the very indirect consequence of that happening was? The current boom in independent tabletop role-playing games, which are more particular than Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. The end result, though it is quite a few steps removed, I feel like it's still pretty directly the result of the popularity boom from Dungeons & Dragons from Stranger Things and Critical Role, is that the hobby for the people that are engaging it in a, I don't think this is that important, but let's just say deeper way, is that they're getting a product that is more tailored to the experience they want. While it might be messy or ugly, I personally feel like that is kind of proof that it does end up trickling down to, if not making it literally a better experience, everybody is doing something that is more what they actually want to do. Everybody is getting something that is their real interest. People who think they're sharing an interest but aren't know they aren't and are encouraged to pursue their actual interests. That can only be good. Can't that only be good? Did I convince you, Densoro? Did I convince anybody else? I don't know. That's my shtick. Thank you for this awesome parlay. I hope you found it a worthy birthday parlay. I thought it was pretty cool. And again, I really, in particular, appreciated that you did take some time to explain what you feel are the merits of some of these things. You're not asking people to just be patient for no reason. I simply wanted to caution against the fact that I do often hear arguments like this where it isn't stated why it's good to do that. People seem to have a, in my opinion, unhealthy attachment to people being patient for no real benefit. Like, our lives are pointless. Like, having fun is the priority here. It's okay to just want things to be enjoyable, but that doesn't necessarily mean people will just lazily pursue the only entertaining piece of media. Maybe this was uncharacteristically positive for me, so I don't know what to say to that. But I don't think it's unwarranted that Densoro is concerned either. I definitely feel that myself a bit. It's scary sometimes feeling like you've identified a cultural pressure to make things shallow. I can very strongly relate to that. I just feel like, as somebody whose job it is to some extent to engage with that and figure out where the interest between you and I overlaps and where my involved interest in game design and buildcraft can be appealing to people, I do think it's more complicated than just all complexity is being removed from media. I do think that there is a more complicated story there. So call that copium, if you will. But I personally do think there's something going on there. So I hope it was interesting to hear what I thought. This was another really long one. Don't know what to say about that lately.